Welcome back to the Cross Encompassed. My name is Lydia Perry and I am your host for today. On today's show, we are talking about how to navigate our digital world as Christians with Professor Brent Dongell. Tell us a little bit about yourself, Brent.
Well, my name is Brent Dongell, as you mentioned. I'm a professor here at Southern Wesleyan University, and so I work specifically with youth and children's ministry, so I get to train up the future pastors and teachers. And I love this topic because it's a truly digital native generation that's coming up. So I spent a few years back studying through about 6 to 8 different books and studies just to really start to further understand how do we move forward in a digital age. And so I would have a lot of thoughts and questions and concerns, just how do we continue to train up not only future pastors, but kids to walk like as Christians in the environments that we're being raised in.
Okay, that's awesome. So starting off, do you tend to be more hopeful or hesitant regarding a shift towards an online-focused world?
Yeah, great question. I think that I see technology as a tool. So one of the most interesting things I've done when I've been preaching at times is I will sometimes talk about how we can use technology and social media for good. And sometimes I'll say, social media technology is not Satan's tool. And that's usually like a side point to the message of how we can do good things. And I've always been surprised about how there's always 1 or 2 adults that come up and say, I needed to hear that not everything on social media or technology is bad. And so there seems to be somewhat of a gap between a certain crowd that would say, oh, this is always bad, this is not good, it's ruining our world. And then I remember going into a class where I was teaching college students, and I was trying to say, hey, we can use technology. Real relationships can happen through technology or social media online. And I looked at them, and they were all staring at me with like, yeah, of course. And it was this moment of like, wow, like there's these 2 different age groups and generations where some see it as completely bad, relationships online are fake, and others are like, just assume, yeah, of course that can happen. Of course that's real. And so, I don't think it's as simple as one person just saying this is what it's good for, this is why it's bad. I really do think that at the end of the day, we need to see it as a tool, and how we use that tool can be used for better or worse purposes. I would say what tool you consider it to be like also changes that up. So you might see it as a huge revolution, kind of like the printing press. And I think we would see that as a good thing now, but at the time, people were killed for their faith when they tried to translate the Bible into different languages and put it in print. So it was used for good, but some people saw that as a danger. So you could see it as such a huge revolution as that, but also you could see it kind of like, if you saw like a microwave, we created a microwave probably thinking it's going to save us time. But even though it might save us time, I'm not sure we necessarily feel like we have more time, even though it makes our lives. And I'm not sure that a microwave always gives us a higher quality of food either. So like it depends on how you would see or use that tool.
Okay, that's awesome. So my next question is, what have you found in your studies or experiences that could help us approach this topic?
Yeah, what have I found that can help us approach this topic? Man, there's been a lot of interesting things around this, a lot of researchers and what they've said. A few of the main things that I found is just the effects are what it does for us. So CNN put out a video and a study called #being13. And one of the things that they did with that was they were just tracking these teens' lives in all their social media accounts. And there was one comment one student said that he said, you know, it's almost like we get to live double agent lives when we're online. And that triggered one thought. It's interesting how sometimes we can't separate ourselves and feel like we're not living fully like ourselves online. We get to almost kind of fake it. But in some of the other studies I saw, they would say just the opposite. They would say when we put things out, we know it doesn't fully represent ourselves online. But when we're attacked online, we see it as completely personal. Like if someone even attacks our fake person or profile, we don't take it as a slight on a fake character. We take it as a slight against us. So emotionally, we still respond as though it's a very personal attack. And so I thought that was very interesting. So there's a lot I could say on just different research studies and what they've said on that. Also, like how it potentially, being online through social media and communication can lower our sense of empathy, or where there is increased anxiety, or whether there's a lot of different things I could go into as to what it means for us today, for sure.
Okay, cool. So my next question is, what are some of the subtle or not so subtle ways our digital world and social media are affecting us?
Yeah. I mentioned Sherry Turkle has written multiple books on this topic, and one was called Alone Together. And so she was mentioning how there's different ways that we look to online relationships, digital technology now, to fill certain holes or needs for us. So if we're feeling lonely, someone should be for us there online. Someone should be there for social media. There should be something to entertain me through this. We put a lot of almost relational expectations on this that I'm not sure we're aware of. And one of the things she do is she actually studied robots, super random, but she was saying, like, she was thinking even like nursing homes. Can a person receive love or care from a robot? Was one of the studies, might seem random, but what she found was if a robot looked realistic enough and it responded in the moment someone had like tears in an act of like almost kindness or gesture, people would almost receive that. They would feel as though the robot heard them or understood them. And so they were saying in some ways through digital world or robotics, we can experience some sort of love if they respond appropriately. But then she also said in another scenario, the problem is as soon as technology breaks down, we have no sense of empathy for it. So she used like this idea of like a kid had this really realistic baby. And so she was cradling it, taking really good care of it. But if you have like an ugly doll, you don't mind dragging it on the ground. But like this little kid had this really like cute baby doll, and she was taking really good care of it, and it would talk. But as soon as the baby shifted from talking normally to like it like was malfunctioning in the way it talked, the little kid all of a sudden started like hitting the baby to try to fix it. The reaction when things didn't work the way they wanted to, they didn't treat them as though it was human or realistic anymore. I would say subtly we do that on social media and online. As long as relationships feel real and they're meeting those needs, we're great with them. But as soon as someone overreacts or we can't respond, we get really frustrated. Like we don't realize it, but we treat it very differently. One other thing that would be small, even just socially, someone said that we moved from more of a face-to-face, like let's talk conversationally, to more of a show and tell culture. So simply it went from like let's have a conversation to hey, look at this meme, or this video, and this is funny together. So like there's a sense of even our conversational style in some ways the way we relate changes, or even just simply as much as some people would prefer talking or texting over calling now. So just how much some people have more social anxiety around that they may not realize how much that nuance is reshaping some of their growth, lack of growth, or communication style.
Okay, that's really cool.
Yeah.
So if Jesus were walking around here today in human form, do you think he'd engage in social media?
Yeah, super interesting question. I actually asked some of my students in my class this question, and one of the things I found interesting was the majority of them said no. So at least there was multiple classes and they had the same feeling, but 16 said no, and about 9 or 10 said yes, that he would. And what I find ironic about that is if I were to probably poll how many of them had social media, I would probably say it would be the reverse, if not more, having some sort of social media. So for me, even before I go into the topic, I thought it's super interesting the conflict some students would have to go through with saying, Jesus wouldn't have social media, but it's okay, or I do. What do you do with that? Like super interesting. The ones that said that he would, I thought they were pretty insightful and right on, in the sense that Jesus did have an impact in different places. So if I were coming down to it, Jesus often went to the marketplace. He went to the place where people were at. And I think one of the things we would have to consider, I think if you don't consider being online as a real relationship, then you probably don't think he would be there. If you think of being online as real relationships, Brad Griffin, a professor at Fuller Theological Seminary out in California, he called being online or the social media world almost like it's like a lunchroom. Like when you're at high school, it's like all the dynamics that take place as to who you sit with, what group you're a part of, whether there's bullying or not, who fits in with what crowd. He almost compared social media, that world, is to a lunchroom. And I thought that was pretty insightful. Like whoever's in that lunchroom, you experience all the dynamics that are there. So I think in some ways, Jesus would very much engage this world, knowing that that's where he would engage with some people that he may not otherwise engage with. That being said, he also, even though he was very relational and went to the marketplace, he didn't always deal with the problems of that day and time beyond his world as much so. So I don't know that he dealt with all the world topics that are going on outside in the broader world issues. I don't know if he would be as concerned with some of the things that we feel are big deals in social media or things that are going on. So I'm not sure how much he would feel a pressure to be involved with it that way. So in one sense, I would say no, and other people might just record him and show stuff. In another way, I am intrigued as to, like, I don't know how much he'd have a phone or not, but I am intrigued in the sense that if he knew how real it was for some people that he may never otherwise meet, how much he would want to engage in them with the relationship through that method, knowing for them that's real. For some gamers, the people they game with consistently, that's real relationships they hang out with every night, even though they're not always face to face. For some other people, that's real relationships when, so all to say, some people don't see online as full relationships, but I would just simply say this, like, for teens, one of the reasons they get on is because they feel left out, or they want to feel like they're missing out. Another reason is likes, but don't tell a teenager this digital social media world isn't real when everyone around them could be gossiping about them and everyone else knows, but they don't because they don't have a phone or they don't have social media. Like, don't tell that teenager this isn't a real world going on outside of their world. There's a reality to that conversation that students and younger generations that are surrounded by it understand. Sometimes we undermine if we aren't as surrounded by it.
That's good. So, well, now we have a better idea of how to navigate our digital world as Christians. Thank you so much for being here, Brent, and thank you for tuning in to the Cross Encompassed. I'm your host, Lydia Perry. Thanks for watching. We'll see you next time.